Hi, this is Ian Desher, author of William Shakespeare's Star Wars, and you are listening to Coffee with Kenobi. With Dan Z, this is the podcast you're looking for.
You know, teaching's not always cracked up to be.
Jason has abilities. His father, Kanan Jarrus, was a Jedi.
Okay.
Come in! I have an opportunity for you all that is very dangerous.
The boy's good, no doubts there, huh?
What was he like?
Intense.
This is Vanessa Marshall, Harrison Dula from Star Wars Rebels, and you're listening to Coffee with Kenobi.
Hello, my friends, and welcome to Coffee with Kenobi. This is your weekly spoiler-free place for Star Wars community and conversation. I'm your host, Dan Zare, delighted to be talking Star Wars with each and every one of you. Since May of 2013, whether you are a fan of Star Wars films, Disney Plus live action and animation, books, comics, collectibles, or Star Wars opportunities at the Disney theme parks, on Coffee with Kenobi, you are among friends as we virtually share a cup of coffee while talking about this galaxy far, far away. Thank you to the official travel partner of Coffee with Kenobi, MEI and Mouse Fan Travel. Check out coffeewithkenobi.com/mousefan-travel for a no-cost, no-obligation quote, and let them know Coffee with Kenobi and Dan Zare sent you. Coffee with Kenobi is also brought to you by Thomas Coffee. Since 1905, they have provided customers of all taste palates with delicious coffee profile, customizable with over 25 flavor offerings. There is a taste for everybody and an experience with every cup. I have a special discount code exclusive to CWK listeners. Use the code DANZCWK20 for 20% off your order. On today's show, Jen Sopchockchai and Ross Hollebon return to join me as we talk about Part 6 of Ahsoka, Far, Far Away. So pull up a chair, grab your favorite coffee mug, and let's have some coffee with Kenobi. Joining us today for a cup of coffee to talk about Part 6 of Ahsoka. The episode is titled Far, Far Away. Commence with the smiling, everybody. This is going to be a fun one, and it's going to be extra fun because, of course, we have our two guest co-hosts. They're piloting the Ghost with me as we talk all about the Disney Plus series Ahsoka. First, Jen Sopchockchai, who has I'm going to let you explain your name, but Jen, welcome back to the show.
I was inspired by Ross's Balin's beard, and so I put more witches because that was maybe the funniest line to me in the whole episode when Shin said that.
It was pretty clever. Also joining us, he has the moniker Balin's beard while we're doing this show because that's just what the name pops up as we talked about last week. Mr. Ross Hollebon. Ross, welcome back, bud.
Hello, friends. Great to be here and another fun episode with a couple characters that we were interested to see finally making their arrival.
Yeah, we may get to that. We may just in fact get to that. I just want to kick it off by saying I feel like I'm in good company when I say every week this show gets better. Do you agree with that statement? And let's talk about it. We're going to give one word to talk about the episode and then overall thoughts on it. Jen, we'll start with you.
Sure. My one word is Faustian. I was inspired by Dan saying Campbellian last week, but I really think that this episode was about everyone making precarious bargains, right? Because we see Thrawn has clearly some deal with the Witches of Dathomir, the Night Mothers, right? We can talk about in a little bit how much of their magic and in what way he has used their magic. But clearly he has made some bargain with them. And then Balin has aligned himself with Thrawn, but he makes it clear that it's not because he's supporting Thrawn, it's because he has his own agenda, right? And Thrawn is a means to an end to find this other greater power, another mystery. And then Sabine, which I think is the central bargain of the episode, has made this deal with Balin. And I think this episode really is ratcheting up the dramatic tension of that choice that she made. especially when she reunites with a particular character that we're going to talk about, and just like something's coming, right? So I think yes, for me it was like, and just the tone of the episode compared to other ones we've had, particularly eerie and sort of spooky, sinister. A lot of that has to do with, I think, Peridia. But yeah, I think that was, for me, that was what tied it all together, is this idea of the Faustian bargain.
That's so cool. Very, 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 very good. I'm glad that. I wouldn't have thought of that, but now it's all click, click, click. It's making my word, I'm about to say, really lame, but that's okay. Maybe I'll change it. Ross, what about you?
But I think in a similar vein, it would have been very cool if I did Machiavellian, seeing as it was talked about faking your own death by Jedi and Night Sisters alike. But alas, I went to the Dan Z bag of tricks. And I chose mythology.
Ooh.
Because it is such an awesome theme throughout this, from the very beginning with Ahsoka and Huyang talking, and then through the episode we get talks about fairy tales and old tales and all of these elements that, if these things are true that a lot of people brush off, then these other things can happen. So that really stood out to me as this is very Filoni pushing that, and I loved how he incorporated it.
Fantastic. Well, I wanted to be really cute and say that my word is hirsute, which means hairy, because at the end there's something really wonderful that happens. And, obviously there are a lot of spoilers in this, so if you have not seen part 6 yet of Ahsoka, then clearly you will want to remove yourself from the situation and come back. We'll be happy to wait for you. No, my real word is meta story. This is a story that's also about stories, and the sprinkling, as you alluded to just now, Ross, with both Balin, the beginning where Huyang is going to tell us a story, just a breakdown of the episode in general. There's so much metacognition going on in it. Sabine is telling herself stories about what she's doing. There's just it's really, really rich, and there's legacy. It's fabulous. I mean, we could all just say amazing, spectacular, fantastic, because this was yet again another fantastic show for the ages, because it's all those right notes. So let's talk about Ahsoka first. She is, even though she's a titular character, she's not in it very much, which I'm more than okay with. But instead, we're greeted to an opening sequence where she and Huyang share this wonderful bit of reflection. And Ross, tell me sort of right before the credits, when we see the title, what did you make of that whole thing? Because I've heard some theories online that I find to be really crazy, but I want to see what you think.
I think first we have to call out how amazing it is to see the Purgle in Studio 54 hyperspace.
yes.
And getting those amazing
they were roller
colors.
Skating, in fact.
Yeah, like it was like I was waiting for the Travolta Purgle to come through as well, but didn't see that. But again, just cool visuals in a new way. Like, hey, there are different ways to look at hyperspace, and I thought this was a fabulous one, and something that added to the mystery and magic right off the bat.
This was ludicrous speed. This was like in Spaceballs. It was faster than hyperspace.
Yeah, ludicrous. They forgot
but,
to get
but then it has like a really sad, there's a really sad and kind of macabre punchline, right? Because where we end up is we find out it's the Purgle graveyard. That really hit me hard.
No, me too. So it can't be John Travolta, because they weren't staying alive. Oh, sorry.
Oh,
yes. Well,
you had to
dad, Aaron Harris. How's that for a dad joke?
All right, so back to Ahsoka.
Yes,
she's fallen back into that melancholy, like all that feel good at the end of the last episode. She's had time to reflect more, and she's concerned about Sabine, and I think so much of it is from what she just learned with Anakin, and said, the last time this person I cared about made a selfish decision, or a decision for themselves, it cost the galaxy. is history repeating again? And it's again just it comes up later where Balin's like, history keeps repeating. I need to stop that. So they are opposing forces in more ways than one there. And I think that's just brilliant storytelling.
Do you think the way she was talking about Sabine and Sabine's choice showed any sort of change from before last week's episode? Because that was the thing I initially struggled with a little bit. I was like, oh, we're kind of taking a step backwards. She's kind of regressed a little bit. It's not the sort of lightness that we saw at the end of the last episode. So I'm curious, like, do you feel like in what she's saying, the lines that she has with Hu Yang, do you feel like there's any signs of development there?
I think there's more development here than there was in anything from last week. Honestly, because it's just humanity. You can learn the greatest lessons every single day of your life, but your humanity, your doubt, your self-esteem, conditions being what they are, your history, it all affects you. It all changes you. As brave and incredible as Ahsoka is, she's faced so much tragedy and so much betrayal and so much ugliness in her life. So if she was completely like do the entire next 3 episodes, I would feel like that would be more disingenuous, because you can wear white all you want and you can have this wonderful metanoias and these changes of heart, but at the end of the day, you're still going to be a human. And she confronted things within herself, but she didn't confront anything with Sabine because she wasn't around Sabine, and she didn't even realize what had happened. She only got the perspective of what happened by the psychometry, where she touches that the key that was Ginsu'd in half. So now she's going to have to face some facts and put some pieces together and confront her former or / current student. I'm still really not sure how that's going to work, but I'm sure we'll talk about it later. So I actually was a little bit relieved to see it.
Mm-hmm. And I think in what she says to Hu Yang, she has a little bit more of an open-mindedness to what happened with Sabine, because she does say she doesn't blame her, right? She's not mad at her, I don't think, right? And maybe before this she would have been. I think she definitely says something like she was fated to make this choice, right? So there's an acceptance there. And we didn't have enough time to prepare her to make the right choice. And then Hu Yang, of course, corrects her and says, like, what if this was her only choice? Which I thought was brilliant. Hu Yang, again, just crushing it every time.
Well, and he also said that it was, they both said it was troubling as opposed to them being angry. So it's just like, how can we course correct this because it's troubling? And that's a much better word, I think, for that scenario. Agreed, because
you're also trying to put things in perspective and understand. And Hu Yang is the voice of reason here. You know, he's been pretty overt in his criticism and in his very blunt honesty, but we've seen over the past couple episodes the softer side of Hu Yang, where he completely is advocating for her and starting to understand her for whatever reason. I know I keep thinking back to when he was holding her helmet, and maybe there's this part of this droid that I've never really been sure if droids have a soul or not. I feel like that's sort of an interesting question to think about in this fictional universe. But Hu Yang is really making a good case for me with his empathy here and trying to advocate for her. But I like that question a lot because Ahsoka, maybe it's a little, it's a little bit easier when you're with your former master and you're in this dreamlike state and you're recovering, but then you're back into it again, right? You're back into the thick of things. Just because you've left the belly of the whale, you've still got half of your adventure to go, at least as far as Campbell would say. But then we get, and I want to hear what you both think about this. He says, I'm going to tell, okay, she says, tell me one of these stories. And he says, a long time ago in a galaxy, or he just says a long time, and I was like, no, that's never been said in Star Wars. No,
it's huge. This is huge.
It's huge. It's huge. And then we see the title Far, Far Away. And I thought, how meta is this? How brilliant is this? Does it mean something, or does it mean nothing, or is it just fun? Ross, what do you think?
I think it means everything. You know, it doesn't mean it has to tie directly to the story, but it's what I'll say we as a fan base, it's what we love. You know, every book starting with it in the front pages, or at least so many books starting with it in the front pages. And then obviously the films, it is the Balin's trying to take us back to the beginning. This is taking us back to the beginning as fans and a fandom to a long time ago, a galaxy far, far away. So again, it's just I don't know, maybe I'm overblowing it just because I enjoyed it so much, but it's very fun and cool in a great way to start an episode with a smile.
It's a huge narrative shift, right? Because our understanding of that phrase was as sort of George Lucas narrating the Star Wars sagas to us, right? Someone telling the story of Star Wars to us. And to hear the same phrase in universe, I think completely pivots the meaning and what the meaning that phrase can carry now, right? Because it's not just the ongoing Star Wars saga and whatever history and we have, each fan has with that saga, but it's the same process these characters are going through in universe, right? Ahsoka, says that she used to hear these tales that start with the same phrase since she was a youngling in the Jedi Academy, right? And there's a comfort there that she has, right? At first she says, no, I don't need to hear it right now. Like, I'm too busy brooding about Sabine, right? But then she says, on second thought, Hu Yang, tell me a story you choose, right? And so the idea that the same kind of comfort and nostalgia, all those warm, fuzzy feelings that we would have to Star Wars as fans is the same kind of feeling that someone like Ahsoka might have to the history of the galaxy. To me, it's really huge. And it introduces this idea that the mythology of Star Wars isn't only for us, right? It's actually functioning within the universe as well.
It's a story. This is, as I said at the top, this is a story about stories. And when I heard it, I thought, oh gosh, it's like he's telling a story about Star Wars. Have we been hearing stories about Star Wars the entire time we've been watching this from Hu Yang? And I think I can boil it down for you into one word. No, of course not. Of course not. I've seen all kinds of clickbait articles about this is retcon Star Wars. No, it hasn't.
Yeah,
it's a very smart, loving, eloquent homage to this story that we love, that we are living in. There's a wonderful meta quality about it because Hu Yang is sort of like our storyteller. I'm reminded of The Hobbit. There's a character. Ignore the movie, kids. It's not worth your time. But the book is beautiful, absolutely beautiful. And there's this wonderful moment towards the end when Smaug is about to be killed. And the person who shoots this black arrow into Smaug is named Bard, right? That's his name. A bard is a storyteller. Hu Yang is taking the role of a storyteller. There's also this really great part about he's like the elder statesman. And he's telling his young daughter, his young companion, a story to relax her nerves and her anxieties before the big scary morning is going to show up. It works on a lot of levels. And plus, it's a loving homage to how George Lucas chose to start these stories for us in 1977. And we've obviously never looked back. I thought it was just completely brilliant. But in no way, shape, or form do I think it is retconned anything.
No. And if anything,
I honestly didn't think that at all.
I didn't either. I saw it pop up on my feed and I was like, what? But I didn't click it because I'm not going to feed that.
If anything, it's similar to, I think, a lot of moves that Rian Johnson makes in The Last Jedi of sort of opening up Star Wars as this living, breathing thing and this ever-changing thing, right? That it can have different parts of it and that it can feel like a fairy tale to some and feel very real and present to others. And different parts of it can feel different ways to other people. So I think it really is kind of a love letter to the fandom. And from Dave Filoni, someone who's kind of like the mantle of Star Wars has been passed to him more or less. I think it really is his kind of way of saying, look, like we're all going to have things that we love and stories that we love. And sometimes stories are just stories, right? And different people can connect with different stories. I love how Ahsoka says, well, of course, history number 1 is the best one, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I love how that's kind of a nod to, like, you know, everyone has their different entry point into Star Wars. And it could, and anyone can have, any entry point can have them generate that same sort of like childlike wonder and kind of comfort that stories can give us.
Wonder is a great way to talk about it. So yeah, you're right. You mentioned earlier, there's this gorgeous imagery, the studio, what'd you say, Studio 54? Is that what you said?
Right.
And then also we find out, no, this is actually this is where the Purgils go to die, and we learn this from Thrawn, I believe, right? Because there's the camera pans back.
I think it's Balin. Balin says it to Morgan.
Is it Balin? Oh, that's right. Okay, so we're on the ship. Sabine is captured. I really, let's just talk about Sabine here, because I missed her in the last episode. Ross, she's trying really, really hard to become one of my favorite characters. She really is, and it's working very, very well.
Be.
Talk to me about her and her first confrontation. No. You know what? Before we talk Sabine, let's just talk about the blue guy. Let's just talk about the blue guy. I'm not talking about Papa Smurf or those giant people from Avatar. No, Thrawn is here in live action. Jen, when he shows up, I mean, I had a lot of metaphorical ideas going through, but just the grandeur and spectacle of him, what I thought was, if you don't know who Thrawn is, if you haven't seen Rebels, but you know the name because you've watched this or you've seen Mandalorian season 2, this clearly demonstrates to us that this is a guy that's a really big deal.
Yes, absolutely. And I think the way that the sequence was shot and the editing of it really emphasized it. And rightly so, right? Because we've, as you mentioned, Dan, we've been hearing Thrawn's name and whispers of him and people shuddering at the sound of his name since season 2 of The Mandalorian, right? And so he better have a big entrance when we finally meet him. And I think for me, it really delivered. I think the panning on the night troopers' boots and then staying on Thrawn's boots as he's walking, and then really lingering on kind of the reaction shots of the other characters, kind of shifting their weight and like being like kind of nervous, right, that he's coming, and just the way that it was like shot and plotted so almost like not slow motion, but like it really took its time in a way that I think built up the anticipation. And then to me, actually, the most chilling part was how the chanting of Thrawn's name by the troopers is just slightly out of sync with the score. And it was really off-putting in a way that I think had a really chilling effect. So I was a big fan of his entrance. I did have a couple of people message me who don't know anything about Thrawn, be like, so what's the big deal? Like, what's the big deal about this guy? Which I was very disappointed in. But I think and I'm like, you don't even understand. Like, everyone should be terrified of him. But to me, as someone who has seen Rebels and has read some of the Timothy Zahn stuff, I feel like it was a very fitting entrance.
I respect that. Even if they don't really see what the big deal is, they know it's supposed to be a big deal, because the way it's shot is terrific. And then when the Star Destroyer looms, and it seems even, dare I say, even bigger than it did in 1977 when A New Hope starts, just because the way it's shot, the way it just sort of explodes onto the planet, dwarfing everything. See, with A New Hope, you're in space. So the only reason you know that it's huge is because you've got the blockade runner, right? The Corvette that's going underneath. But this, because it's on the planet, you can clearly tell how gargantuan it is. The chanting was very, and the witchcraft, there's something very demonic and evil about it. Mm-hmm. Very haunting. And then when the main trooper turns around, his name has escaped me at the moment, and half of his face is covered in like this gold plating. There's a movie from the late 70s called Excalibur. It's like Liam Neeson's first ever movie. Patrick Stewart's in it. It's about King Arthur. It's not a great movie, but it's really fun. And at the end, Mordred, who is the evil son of King Arthur, he fights Arthur as they're fated to do, and he looks like Mordred, like the gold plating of his face. And I probably just lost 99% of the audience from this obscure reference to this dopey movie. But the point is, there's so much evil. The chanting you mentioned, Jen, is very, very clear. The ominous grandeur of him. And my feelings on Thrawn is that I always felt he's sort of OP. I'm borrowing a Mason term, overpowered. It's sort of a video game term. Much the way I would used to cringe at Bane in the Batman comics when he first appeared, or when Venom first was the thing. Sometimes characters just seem so overwhelming and daunting that it kind of sucks your hope out of you, which I know is the point. But it's effective. Ross, talk to us about Thrawn.
Yeah, and I think even with some of the points that you both brought up about the timing and the cadence, building that tension, that's who Thrawn is. He is calculating. He wants to put you off guard, so he's going to wait for that uncomfortableness to start and read your reaction to it. So I love how that happened. The red eyes were just, I was so curious how well they would be done. And, you know, the special effects team, the makeup team, way to go. Like that, it looked awesome. It looks like some heavy space calories have occurred, maybe for Thrawn, because he's a little bit bigger than other times. But I eat those same calories, so I'm not complaining by any stretch. But that was like the little difference there.
So the Exile 15 is that?
Yeah. Oh my God. So the Exile 15 at least. But as you talked about the captain of Thrawn's guard, his name's Enoch, and it
even more
made
perfect.
me think of the Sons of the Harpy from Game of Thrones, where they're all wearing those masks. But what an awesome character. And it's in Rebels, he had Rook, the guy that would climb, the alien that would climb around on all fours and stuff. So he always seems to have this random lieutenant who has a little bit of extra creepiness to him. So I love that kind of popped up here too.
My obscure film reference to kind of help Dan out was Ridley Scott's Kingdom of Heaven, because they also fight with those golden masks. So I think it's just kind of like a medieval trope, I'm going to assume. It's used, but you're right. It's so incredibly creepy. I couldn't look away, but at the same time I did want to look.
Right. And isn't there a religious context for Enoch? Like, isn't it it was
That's
a
what
book
I thought, but I knew that you would know that better than I would.
It was a book removed from the Bible. And it kind of tells a story about why some angels fall out of heaven. And it's got sort of this idea of, well, for one thing, Enoch is the father of Methuselah and the great grandfather of Noah. But there's definitely like there's an eeriness about it. I need to do some more research onto that and refresh my memory, but there's definitely some religious connotations to this. What I love about this, in comparison to the entrance of another famed character, Ezra Bridger, is that it perfectly encapsulates both of them. Thrawn has got to have this incredible grandeur and majesty. He's got to be like, oh gosh, I'm trying to think of a nice way to say this on a family show, so I probably just won't say it all. But he's very, he's like driving a Mercedes kind of a guy, right? He just has this massive stage. Ezra is living with some creatures, very, very simple, living simply off the land, no pomp and circumstance at all to him. And I think that was just perfectly telling. You've got selfless, and I think it's fair to say Thrawn is selfish. The thing about Thrawn, I will say real quickly, because I do want to talk about Ezra, is that in the books, the original books, The Thrawn books that are canonical, I'd never really gravitate towards as much as the classics from the Legends line. But Thrawn was always more about the plan and the calculation and the execution than actual execution. But in Rebels, I feel like they went off the rails and he just became just scary and nasty. And I mentioned in my review that he's more of a villain along the lines of Lex Luthor than he is Darth Vader. But very, very scary and intimidating. I want to talk about Ezra, but let's just take the route that Sabine took. Riding a rat, horse, donkey thingy. Ross, take us through sort of Sabine, the key things that jumped out for you about Sabine. I'm laughing at the word donkey. Sorry, I'm I can't help it.
Colby will be happy about that, but
exactly.
They did call them howlers, so we have another wolf element. Surprise coming from Dave Filoni.
I like that it's a rabbit donkey, but go ahead.
But I think from the first shot of Sabine. So we left last episode and the beginning of this episode with Ahsoka in this white kind of tunic covering. We go immediately to Sabine in this drab, gray, like mechanic one piece almost. And that jumped out to me immediately as well as just like, hey, we have the different sides of Ahsoka and Sabine here as well. We know, and I love Sabine as this colorful artist. Mm-hmm. She is so singularly focused, and that's what Baylan keeps counting on, that she's not even worried about any of that right now. She's just like, how do I get to Ezra? And, she's pulling no punches. When she's talking to Thrawn, everyone else is worried, and she's like, hey, blue guy, where's my buddy? I need to see him. Awesome. And she just goes after it. Then she's going and, we're getting Enoch telling her to die well. And I thought that was an amazing, it wasn't even an exchange. It was just him informing her. But what he was doing, here are your weapons. Here's your lightsaber. Die well. Here's what you're going to find out there. I thought it was fascinating once again. Then we're out there and we run into the nomads and she disperses them. The coward howler who has run away with one of the best comedic scenes.
Yes.
Maybe in Star Wars ever with her.
The way she talks to him is delightful.
Yeah. Shaming this poor animal.
If you've ever had a dog, you get it. Yeah.
It was so fun. But then the howler really being the hero of the moment, driving her to the next stage. And I'll let someone else jump in on this, but it was magical. And thank you, Greg McLaughlin, for referring to these little creatures, the Noddies, as Erox.
Yeah, he texted me that as well.
I thought that was amazing.
I like Greg's name better.
This is Vanessa Marshall, and you're listening to Coffee with Kenobi.
I mentioned Thomas Coffee at the top of the show, and I'm going to tell you a little bit more about this wonderful company and their delicious coffee. Thomas Coffee started in 1905 and has grown and established itself as a premier coffee. They have over 25 different flavors of coffees, including classics like almond, hazelnut, French vanilla, and more. They have also flavors like chocolate raspberry, maple bacon, banana hazelnut. Honestly, delicious, delicious stuff. Thomas Coffee is known for 5 different single origin coffees with a variety of different blends and roast profiles. This expertise in coffee craft is built on hard work and rooted in over a century of dutifully cultivating a network of coffee partners throughout the world, from conscientious growers in the finest coffee regions on earth to skilled roasters and blenders. They roast their coffee in-house to make sure they are sending out the best possible product to Thomas Coffee customers. Plus, Thomas Coffee ships nationwide too. You can order Thomas Coffee on their website, thomascoffees.com, and can find them also on Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok. For my Coffee with Kenobi listeners, you can use a discount code of DanZCWK20 for 20% off your order. A great deal for fabulous coffee. Again, that is DanZ CWK20 for 20% off your order.
I went crab Jawas because they remind me a lot of the Jawas, and they're like basically hermit crab people.
They remind me of the little troll thingies from Frozen too.
Yeah.
So the fight sequence that I also love when she stands up to Thrawn, and you mentioned the calories thing before about Thrawn is just sort of a playful term, but I mean, let's think about how much time he's been away, right? He's been away for a really, really long time, chronologically, from before A New Hope started. So he doesn't know about anything that's happened. Luke Skywalker, Vader, the Emperor. He doesn't know about Luke, I would assume, and he certainly doesn't know what happened to Vader and the Emperor, unless the Wi-Fi is really, really good where he's at, but I sort of doubt that. And so he's aged a lot too, because someone at work was asking about this. Why does Thrawn look like that? Well, he said he's aged a lot. The only thing I will say about Thrawn really quickly that threw me was the hair, the skin, the eyes, but the hair just looked like a wig.
Yeah, a little wonky,
which is fine.
They must have like tried to
mirror
recede the hair. Yeah, it's the hairline. I think it's like in a weird place, but
yeah.
I really loved that Lars Mikkelsen's voice performance from Rebels complete 110% translates in live action and really nails, because I think the one of the most distinguishing features of Thrawn is his sort of quiet civility that can, if you're not paying attention, sort of mask his cruelty, right? And so I think that they really nailed him. Like, he never has to raise his voice, right? And he never like he barely moves. He stays very still. And yet it's the words coming out of his mouth are so incisive and calculating and villainous, right? And so I really liked that his persona, as I had imagined him from previous stories, I think really carried over nicely.
Incisive is a terrific word for that, because there's, you can smile and be a villain, as Hamlet says about his uncle Claudius. There's a terrific like this burgeoning deadliness about him. He's like a snake that's coiled up, right? And he's just looking at you. And Sabine, even like Sabine, as brave as she is facing him, she looks away. And there's a part of me that thought Sabine's scared too. And he knows it. But he also knows, as the Night Sisters point out, shout out to seeing Night Sisters in live action for the first time.
Amazing.
That very, very cool. He's dismissive of her, but they say she's dangerous. This one reeks of Jedi. And I still think that's because of her association with Jedi. I still don't believe that she's a Jedi. They did a great job of her holding up her hands, and you're thinking, oh, is she going to move the wall? And I was thinking, I don't believe this. What's the trick? And it's the rumbling of Thrawn's starship showing up again.
They're really toying with us this entire episode, right? Because I think
it's great.
The camera starts to go to Baylan and Shin when they say this place reeks of Jedi, and then it sort of quickly pans over to Sabine, and you're like, oh wow, they're talking about her. What does that mean, right? And then instantly my mind is reeling of like the implications of if they're saying that she's a Jedi, what does that mean?
Right.
And I think the whole episode sort of like has these little moments where it's like it's reminding us, hey, we still don't really know. She can do this.
But did they miscalculate where the reek was coming from? Was it Baylan? Because that's what Thrawn alludes to later.
Yep.
He's like,
true.
So, the former Jedi told you that Ahsoka was dead. Oh, I see.
Right.
So there's all this questioning that has been brought up multiple times, but all these little digs back and forth where when he says, oh, you're General Baylan Skoll of the Jedi Order, and then the look from the witches is awesome.
It was like, what you talking about, Willis?
Caught off guard.
Yeah. Yeah, I like that. And I only want to say really quickly about Sabine before we get to her reunion with Ezra is I think that fight sequence she has where all those marauders try to ambush her, that was vintage, absolutely vintage Sabine. That was classic, wonderfully choreographed. It's nice to see her wield a lightsaber where she's actually a force with it. And I'm not trying to be playful with the term force. She's like forceful and elegant, and she's a Mandalorian. She's using the grappling hook and just her armor coming to her aid. The comedic moment that you mentioned, Ross, was just absolutely fabulous. And there's almost like there's this a weird playfulness between the two. And all of a sudden this creature becomes really, really endearing because Sabine is really, really endearing, and they connect together. Let's talk about Balin's skull. By Balin's beard, we finally get some actual
Ross is stroking his beard.
Yes, he is. Well, can't you hear it, everyone? It's just...
Well, no, I mean, listeners need to know what's going on.
Yeah, no. I think they can. I think they can sense it. Now, look, we finally get some insights into Balin's skull and what he's about. I've always found him compelling, but here we get some real, actual things. We get some great moments of reflection and a conversation between him and Shin that I think are important. Jen, what stood out to you about their conversations?
I think number one, Ray Stevenson's performance is very, very nuanced because
Agreed.
You can see the pain and regret. And then when Shin asks, "Do you miss the Jedi Order?" he's so wistful, right? So it's very clear that he's kind of torn about it, right? And I love his answer of I miss the idea of it, but not sort of the corrupt reality, right? And so I thought the performance was amazing because in his eyes you can see, like, because those exact lines can be delivered in a much more flat way, and one-dimensional way. But I think the way that he was delivering them, I really bought that this is someone who feels so betrayed by something he loved so dearly, right? And that's sort of why. And the best villains, in my opinion, are the ones where you catch yourself in moments of being like, no, they're right. Like, oh, they know what's up. And I feel like I had that with him, where he's sort of describing breaking the cycle of war and how, history is inevitable, and how, the rise of a rebellion and the fall of the Jedi and the rise of the Empire. Like, he's like, it's just over and over and over again. We have to find some way to sort of break that cycle. I really believe that he was trying to do that for good reasons in that moment, which I don't know if I would have necessarily said in past episodes.
And so, of course, the classic, the path of evil is paved with good intentions. So what is it that gets him so disillusioned? Because he clearly harbors a massive grudge. I don't know if he feels wronged or he doesn't like what happened with Order 66 and the response. It's sort of hard to have a response when you're ambushed like that galactic-wide. But did you pick up anything new, Ross, about Balin's skull that maybe give us a little more perspective as to why he is the way he is? Or is it too early to know?
I think we have so much more to watch to learn about him. But I think it has been consistent throughout all the episodes, knowing that there is depth there and there is much more story. And it becomes even more interesting when Shin, who appears to have the mind of a 5-year-old at times, just very simplistic, not taking a shot or anything like that, but we've talked about her being feral, very simple. It's almost like she's a weapon, and she asks very basic questions that enables him to kind of flaunt this wisdom that she just hangs on all the words of it. So I find that relationship very interesting, but I loved how he's getting into it. And this is something that Monica pointed out during our second viewing. He says, this is a land of dreams and madness.
Mm-hmm.
That is also basically the name for a documentary about Studio Ghibli and Hayao Miyazaki. The title of that documentary is The Kingdom of Dreams and Madness. So I don't think there's an accident there. That is an amazing storyteller that I'm sure Filoni loves.
Yep.
So wanted to call that out because that's beautiful, but it builds into the stories of the galaxy are considered folk tales, and we're seeking the beginning, and this is the place if the old stories are true. So he's really clinging to these elements of story, mythology, folktale, and it's the same stories that Ahsoka was mentioning at the beginning. So I'm just wondering if there's ever going to be a moment. I'm very curious if he's going to meet Huyang and what will happen there. Will that trigger something for him?
Well, that's a neat idea. And that's the importance of this is, I grew up thinking this was folklore. I didn't think this was real. And to us, we're looking at it like, oh, this is a planet. We've seen a million Star Wars planets. To us, it's not really triggering any kind of visceral response besides the fact that we see Thrawn and Ezra. That's all that's doing that for us. But for him, there's so much more to it. And again, really hammering home the idea, the importance, the sacredness of story. For the ancient Greeks, one of the amazing things about ancient Greek mythology is that even though people were very separated across Greece, they had no real way of communicating with one another directly per se. But as they were telling these stories, eventually people started to realize, hey, even though no one shared these ideas, we've got similar ideas and similar gods and similar concepts, which is amazing. It is another real world application of the power of story and storytelling. And here he is talking about that, but he's also very, very reflective too, because what happened with him with the Jedi, whatever that may be. And the stories maybe he has told himself to try to process whatever has happened, so much so that they talk about Ezra and Shin says, oh, he's like me. And I don't know the exact line, but he says, like, no, you're something more, something greater. Doesn't he say greater?
I've trained you to be something greater, I think.
Yes. So she is like his project, but also I get the sense that he thinks of her like a daughter. And that might just me projecting because I'm a parent. But I don't know. Do you get that too, Jen?
I think her asking that question of like, oh, just like me, shows that she's so desperate to belong somewhere.
Yes.
Right. And I think for me that made their relationship kind of unlock, because I was sort of like, oh, that's why she's with him, because she's so desperate to belong to something and to have a family, have a community. And so I feel like that's why that perks her interest. She's like, oh, someone else who was post the Jedi Order but has been trained as a Jedi. And then he corrects her, right, and says, no, we're trying to build something else. Like we're not them, we're part of something else. So I think also that's probably why he's kind of taken her on, is because he is also, because I think the major line, to go back to your original question of like, what do we learn about his past relationship with the Jedi Order? The main thing he says here is, when I was a little older than you are now, I watched everything I knew and loved burn. Right. Mm-hmm. I'm probably not getting that exactly right, but it's right. Like he watched it burn, and that was the traumatic experience. And he doesn't want that to happen again. And so I think for him, starting at the beginning, creating something new, he's trying to rebuild something that won't be taken away from him. Mm-hmm. And that's sort of why he is gravitating towards Shin as well, and like because it's not just he wants the power for himself, right? That you get the sense that he's not like Thrawn in the sense of like he's not looking to kind of rule the whole galaxy, but he's looking to rebuild that won't be destroyed.
Right. And it's vague, isn't it? Because he wants to put a stop to the cycle, but it's the cycle of life, of history that we see in real life as well. So how do you do that? I mean, do you destroy everything? Is that what he's going to want to do? That doesn't seem to make sense. But I don't know. I'm not a megalomaniac, so I don't know.
And that goes back to Kylo Ren as well.
Right.
Let it die. Let the past die.
Mm-hmm.
Like start over. Let it die.
I am dying to find out what he thinks he's looking for.
Me too.
And how big it is, right? Because is it something related to the Force? Is it some kind of weapon, right? Because he does say that you have to destroy in order to create. But is Thrawn just taking care of that? So yeah, I really hope that we get at least some kind of inkling of that by the end of the season. I think that would be great.
Well, in terms of a weapon, what stood out to me about the Eye of Sion, but then the little ship, the little shuttle that comes out of it as well, everything's gold. And then at the henge, where they meet the Night Sisters, all of the markings are gold as well. So gold is the strongest conductor, or one of the strongest conductors of energy as well. So I just keep thinking, how is this going to factor in? And is that some of the power that is it going to be used one way or the other, whether Balin's using it, whether Sabine's building something crazy and she's like, oh, I can tie this in together and use all this gold as a conductor to get us back. That's all the stuff that was going through my mind, just because even the droids in there are gold plated. So it was, that really stood out to me.
I hadn't thought about that, the notion of using that as a conductor, but that's great. Really apt. Plus, gold is such a sign of greed anyway. And I wouldn't consider Thrawn greedy as far as monetary goods, but he's certainly greedy when it comes. He's almost like parasitic in a way. He wants to sort of consume other people's cultures. He's so obsessed with learning about everyone. There's this really great ominous moment at the end where he says, "Hey, tell me about this Ahsoka, and tell me all about her master." Well, pull up a chair, Uncle Thrawn. You're about in for quite a story. Speaking of
how many seasons of television does he have time to watch?
Exactly.
Well, and in the canon books, he met Anakin.
That's right. Absolutely. And they went to Batu together.
Yeah.
So that's
so interesting right now to be like, ooh, how is that conversation going to go once he learns that?
Because he knows. I mean, the books do make it pretty clear. I did like that trilogy. That he sort of pieces together that Anakin and Vader are one and the same.
Yep.
It's very strongly referenced, but there's no reason to think that he necessarily knows Ahsoka per se, which obviously he doesn't, because the name does not ring a bell. So we finally get some wonderfully charming moments where Ezra appears. Sabine sees him. I want to talk about the reunion. Sort of, what were you? Did it meet your expectations? How did it connect for you? What did you both think about it, Jen?
I really liked how they played it awkwardly, because I think it made it very realistic that they're people who share a very strong connection, but they haven't seen each other in a really long time. And I feel like the kind of shifting back and forth between, she doesn't know, Sabine in particular, like she doesn't know what to say. She's smiling one second, she's sort of like getting caught up in the moment in another, right? And they don't just immediately hug each other, right? It takes a little while, and which I thought was the right way to go. And so I thought, and I kept thinking of, if you don't know the history of these two characters, how does this play? And I think they smartly played it like it just has a lot of implied history. Like, you don't necessarily need to know the specifics of the relationship, but you can tell these two people mean something to each other. And I do feel like the line she has brought me right back to Rebels, where she's like, always a plan, never a good one.
Yes.
And that was like, oh, they're back. Like this is the rapport that they used to have. And so, yeah, I thought it was really sweet, but also doomed, right? And like, there's this sense of dread that I had watching the scene, because he says, it worked, right? Everything's fine, right? And she just is like, let's not talk about it.
Yeah, give me a minute.
We don't need to talk about that, right? Like, and you're like, well, you're going to have to eventually, and he's going to be very angry when he finds out what you had to do to get back to him, right? And so just knowing that the fallout of that is coming, undercut the sweetness of the scene with this sense of dread.
And I enjoyed it. I think my biggest thing, seeing Ezra, it's the first Rebels character where I'm just like, okay, I need to get used to this. So it may have been the biggest.
He's a completely different look.
Yeah, but he's also, as we talked about with Thrawn being gone a long time, Ezra's been gone a long time, and he was younger when he was there, so he's grown up quite a bit. So I think just with taking in everything else and then meeting him, I was like, okay, I need to get more accustomed to this. I liked it. I think it's going to be great. I'm not used to it yet. So I need to give myself that time and to let that develop a little bit.
Okay. That's cool. I didn't know what you were both going to say. Interesting. I couldn't have loved it more. I thought it was tonally perfect. I really wanted this to be special. So often in books or things I watch, when there's a reunion of characters, so often I feel let down. Why aren't they hugging? Why aren't they more sad? Why aren't they processing this the way I would if I was separated from my loved ones? They meet. There's some realistic, playful banter because Sabine is not really super huggy anyway, but she can't help herself. He comes out from the first line he utters, and I can't remember what it is exactly right now. His sound, the delivery, his posture, the way he was standing, sort of casual, but also like with intent. I thought that's Ezra. That's my Ezra. That is Ezra Bridger through and through. I didn't have that same response that you had, Ross. I certainly did with Hera. I was pretty vocal about that, and she eventually grew on me. With Ezra, there was no learning curve for me because of his candor and the delivery. And when I saw that he had a beard and long hair, I thought I was relieved. Actually, I didn't know that I didn't want a beard per se, but now that I see it, it's got that classic mentor / the wise Jedi master grows the beard. Kanan grows the beard after he loses his sight. Of course, Obi-Wan Kenobi, Qui-Gon,
So you're especially upset that you shaved this morning?
No, because I know it. I just have to sneeze. It'll come roaring back. I don't have to take a Purrgil away to another planet and get it back. So stay tuned.
You forgot Luke in The Last Jedi. That's what his facial hair reminded me of the most, actually.
Okay. Exactly. So it's a classic mentor thing where the wise man has a beard. I'm not saying that Ezra's going to be a mentor necessarily per se, but there's certainly an implication there just from an archetypal perspective and just classic Star Wars tropes. And the fact that they eventually do approach and they hug, and it's not like sexual, and it's just these people love each other. They're connected as the deepest, dearest of friends. And I like that the camera pans backwards and we just see their feet. They're appropriately away from each other. Yeah. It's not, there's nothing salacious about it. It's just, oh my God, I love you. I've missed you. And they're connected.
It's a great contrast to the Thrawn, the same shots with Thrawn.
Exactly. Where again, he doesn't need this big grandiose bravado situation. They're just easing into it and allowing themselves to kind of acclimate. And then, it worked, didn't it? And she's like, yeah. Well, how'd you get here? Well, can I just have this moment now? And he's like, sure. He's so laid back, but he's really beautifully in tune with the Force. I mean, it's because of him that Ahsoka even is still around because of A World Between Worlds. And I keep waiting for that moment to be brought up. And when Hugh Yang says at the beginning of the episode, I think you've got some stories for me. Does Hugh Yang even know about the existence of A World Between Worlds? It's possible that he doesn't. I don't know. I would like to think that he knows, but who knows how much of that has been kept sort of between their immediate ghost family.
Well,
So
now I was
now,
wondering if that's where that was going to go at the very beginning when Hu Yang turned to Ahsoka and said, perhaps you have a story for me.
exactly. That's what I mean. Yeah. And so that's why I'm thinking he knows something happened, but he doesn't know, which makes me think again, maybe he doesn't know about A World Between Worlds at all and the existence of that other dimension. I feel like it would be safe. It'll be wise to keep that a secret. As we know.
I mean, if you experience something like that, would you try to explain it to other people?
Exactly. Well, now that we've all gathered together, I can finally talk about this. No,
save it for your memoir, Dan.
Yes. So yeah, but that threw me. I'm really at a loss for words, but that really threw me, Jen. Well done. Not too many people have been able to do that.
Sorry.
No, it's great. I love that. It's good to keep me on my toes. No, I don't know. I don't really know, but it was just, I thought that reunion was perfect. I couldn't have loved it more. What I liked about it too is like, I didn't get choked up and they didn't get choked up. There was just joy. And then, can we talk about this later until they're going to chat? And you presumably the next episode is going to show us, as I was going to find out. But it just seemed natural and organic. It really did. If you had just been reacquainted with someone you've been away from for 10 plus years or whatever, the first thing you're not going to tell them is, oh my gosh, I've missed you. By the way, these homicidal murders are right behind us, and all those sacrifices you made and that beard you got and all that great stuff and your little turtle friends, they're probably all doomed because I was selfish. You're probably not going to dive into that. So again, I love the humanity. That's what my word should have been, humanity. This whole episode is full of authenticity from a perspective of what it means to be a human being and to be flawed and to need that connection, like you said with Shin Hati, sorry. And it's just terrific.
Hati works.
This is Star Wars. You can have two different pronunciations.
That's true. Han. Exactly. All right. Anything you want to say before we give our letter grades and wrap this up?
I haven't done Academic Corner yet. There was kind of a brief moment where I could have done it, but then the moment sort of passed. But
okay,
I went down a big rabbit hole with Macbeth and the Three Witches this week. And by this week, I mean just like for an hour this morning,
right?
When I had time to do it. And I found and so the reason that I thought of this, I should give some context anchored in the episode. The reason I thought of Macbeth and the Three Witches, very obviously we have the three night mothers.
Yes.
They're referred to
as
as night
mothers. I think you're going to say on a piece of paper and slip it to you, and then tell me if I'm right, because I think I know what you're saying. Go ahead.
The great mothers.
But we got a little hint of this in, I want to say, the premiere, where Morgan Elsbeth says the threads. She uses the phrase the threads of fate, right? And so I think, to me, I was definitely thinking of these as the three fates, and then I was like, oh, is Tehran Macbeth, right? Sort of, and they're kind of egging him on with like the glory of his potential future, and then Morgan then is sort of like the Lady Macbeth figure, and so I kind of generally had that parallel in mind, and I was like, well, let me look up sort of what the significance of these three witches is, and apparently it's very complicated. Mythologically, and so the quote that I pulled was from a book that I was not familiar with before I started looking this up, but it's called We Three: The Mythology of Shakespeare's Weird Sisters. It's by Laura Shamus. Hopefully I'm pronouncing that correctly. And she says, in Macbeth, Shakespeare joins an Anglo-Saxon mythological trio to a Greco-Roman three-headed deity, right? So there's a Greek goddess named Hecate, I think is how you pronounce it.
Hecate, isn't it?
Okay, it's one of those things that I've read so many times, but I've never actually had to say out loud
right.
how to pronounce it. And that sort of Shakespeare sort of was drawing from these different pantheons to create what Shamus calls a unique cosmology involving female Trinitarian archetypes. It could be argued it is as archetypal cosmology unique to its time in Jacobean England, because they were having lots of like witch hunts and stuff then, perhaps related to Christianity and the female, thus representing important cultural reflection as well. And so this really got my mind going, one, because I feel like I then remembered that the three main characters in the series are Ahsoka, Sabine, and Hera. And so I was like, oh, this is this amazing kind of contrast between these like trinities, which I thought was really cool. But then I kind of thought of this question. I don't necessarily have an answer to it, but how is Peridia, right? Because this is the first time we've been to another galaxy in Star Wars. We haven't even talked about that yet. This was a huge step, right? In the sort of mythology of Star Wars. But how is Peridia as a cosmology unique to its time? And by its time, you could go either way. You could say like our time, right? Because myth is reflecting on teaching us something about ourselves, but or within the Star Wars universe, sort of like what's unique to it in terms of how because clearly Dave Filoni is sort of like pulling from this mythological literary tradition to make something new.
And to add to your wonderful, I didn't even think about the fact that it's three witches, and three is such a sacred number in mythology and Christianity, of course. that I didn't even thought about that connection. But this is perfect because for Shakespeare's audiences, those three witches would have been extra frightening because Shakespeare was Catholic. He was Christian. And the notion of this pagan concept of witches and sacrifice and all this and magical things would be extra threatening. So then if Thrawn takes on the role of Macbeth, well, if Morgan Elsbeth is going to be Lady Macbeth, she's about to lose her mind pretty quickly.
I'm ready to see that.
yeah. Diane Insomato, is that how you say her last name? She's awesome.
Is it Inosanto? I want to say.
Innocent. Yeah, she's been terrific and wonderfully understated in her performance. So that is something that I think we need to bookmark because that's pretty rich. I love that, Jen. You always deliver. Again, you're the new mailman, not Karl Malone anymore. It's a thing. It's a thing. Well, let's
and rain or snow.
And rain or snow. That's right. Let's give our letter grade and final thoughts on this. Ross, take it away, buddy.
Yeah, I'm going A. It is, to me, it's not the A+ that last week was. I still loved it, but it is. Last week was just beyond for me.
Well, yeah, but you also, like you said, the journey of you watching last week was even more special too.
Yeah. So I mean, every element about that, and that impacts every viewing, every memory that goes with it. You know what? This one we got Thrawn, and we got Ezra back, and we got to see so many great characters doing things, and then just Balin becoming more of what he's becoming, and all of it coming to the surface. It was excellent, and I can't wait to see what it's leading up to for the final 2 episodes. Wonderful.
Jen?
So I'm also going A. Yeah, sorry. And that it is because it's similar to what Ross said. The lack of the plus, I feel like, is because no matter how good this episode was, it was going to be some kind of emotional not let down in a bad way, right? You know, not in terms. I don't mean let down in terms of disappointment, but just like we've peaked on the roller coaster and we're kind of coming down for a little bit of a breather. And so I feel like even though we got so many spectacular things, Thrawn, Ezra, I really was not expecting Ezra in this episode actually. Thrawn, I was like, it's kind of time for Thrawn.
Yeah.
But I wasn't sure if he was going to be the bulk of the episode or kind of at the tail end of it as kind of a cliffhanger for next week. But I think, we got so much. There was so much delivered. And really, this episode reinforced that this series is distinguishing itself amongst all the Disney Plus series as delivering something in Star Wars that we haven't got in series form yet. And the mythology and kind of the mysticism and the wonder and the sort of the lore that I think I love so much about Star Wars, and a lot of my favorite Star Wars stories really dig into that. I think this just continues to deliver on that front and give us something really special. But again, it's really just because, the show's name is Ahsoka, and Ahsoka is my favorite Star Wars character, and she has like 3 minutes in this episode. So I think inevitably I wasn't going to be able to give this A+ no matter what.
Well, I'm going to give it an A+. I think this is, like I said before, this show gets better every week. And one of the reasons I'm so happy that it affected me the way it did is because there wasn't a lot of Jedi stuff. I mean, there's certainly a lot of the myth of the Jedi, and there's a great little sequence with Sabine wielding a lightsaber, but that didn't scream Jedi to me. The fact that you can take a story I've been wanting to see since I saw the finale of Rebels. Was that in 2017 when Rebels stopped? Does that sound about right?
Maybe
something like that. Something like that. People listening, you can look on your Google machines and help us figure that out. It was
March 3rd, 2017.
2017. Okay, I was right. Good. It surpassed my expectations. One of my most important things I think that I've found throughout this journey is, again, expectation without regulation equals fan constipation. And I was afraid I was going to get, I wasn't going to affect me emotionally, but the pathos was so wonderful. The Thrawn entrance was just so over the top and ominous. And I was scared. I was scared for our heroes. I was worried about Sabine. making it through the episode. I thought she was going to be eaten by that rat thingy that I know there's a real name to, but it hasn't quite entered my lexicon yet, but it will. It was just really powerful. Great storytelling. It would be hard for me not to give something an A+ that's so embraces the power of story and storytelling, which is my favorite thing. It's my God, my family, my friends, and stories. That's the order. And this just brought it all together for me. And again, the Star Wars found family thing, just so delightful. I loved it. I mean, if it continues its trajectory of everyone being better, like I don't feel like we've emotionally peaked yet. I feel like the best is yet to come. And boy, oh boy, am I glad I'm going to share it with the two of you on Coffee with Kenobi.
Listening to Coffee with Kenobi, you are with Dan Z, the podcast you're looking for. This is
So Ross, as always, thank you again, my friend. It's great to see you taking care of business on the album Cockpit Podcast and all the other great things you do on Fantha Tracks. Please let us know what's going on and where people can find you.
Yeah, I mean, I'm like all Ahsoka at this point. So it's a lot of other things. I put out a Dennis Keithley joined me for the very quick escape pod version of the album Cockpit Podcast to go through some of the music of Ahsoka Volume 1. So that was a blast. It's a shorter episode, just going over 3 songs. So if you haven't checked that out, head over to Spotify and check it out. And otherwise, I'm just enjoying my day-to-day helping students find Butler University and the College of Communication there. So we just launched the CCOM Podcast. So I have started a new podcast, and the host is the dean of the college, Joe Valenzano. And I produce it with Mark Harris, the audio engineer, in a professional studio in our building. So it is fun. We had a professional voice actor, Amy Ulrich, who graduated in 98 from Butler, and she did the intro and the close. So I got to write a script and work with her to record it. So again, just blessed by more opportunities to do the things that I love in creating content.
So good, man. You continue to impress, my friend. I love that. And I'm so glad, because I was afraid you had so much downtime. Thank goodness it's probably gonna fill up. Jen, you're not someone who has a lot of downtime either. You are a thriving professional, an awesome mom, and of course you've got the Long Take. So many great things going on. Please let us know what you've got going on.
Sure. You can find my writing at thelongtake.substack.com. So that's a new hybrid sort of newsletter blog. I am doing weekly breakdowns of new episodes of Ahsoka, and I very specifically and deliberately do not overlap with anything we say here, which is a really fun challenge, because I think we talk a lot about, we say a lot of good things on these episodes, and so I'm really kind of taking more of a deep dive into specific aspects of each episode, which is really fun. Loki season 2 is starting really soon, in a few weeks, so I'm going to be covering that weekly as well. And there's also a companion podcast that focuses more on films and the Oscar race, the Long Take Review. And we just finished at like a 2-hour episode predicting the Oscars for next year. And so if you are interested in sort of awards, prestige movies, we talk a lot about what to look out for in the next couple months. It's like a nice preview of movies for the rest of the year.
A huge thank you to Ross and Jen for joining me once again to talk about Star Wars and the Disney Plus series Ahsoka. You can go to coffeewithkenobi.com for Star Wars news, announcements, reviews, videos, and so much more. It's a great place to kind of think of it as your hub to find different ways to catch all the Coffee with Kenobi shows and the Facebook group and all the other things we have going on in the Star Wars community. The official travel partner of Coffee with Kenobi is MEI and Mouse Fan Travel. You can go there for a no-cost, no obligation quote, and when I say there, I mean coffeewithkenobi.com/mousefantravel. They will help you plan your magical vacation to Walt Disney World, Disneyland, book your next cruise, or even join us on our Coffee with Kenobi and MEI and Mouse Fan Travel cruise on the Disney Wish once we have dates for the summer of 2025. For more information on that, be sure to join us on the Coffee with Kenobi live show every Tuesday night. Again, that website is coffeewithkenobi.com/mousefantravel. If you are a coffee lover, and many of you are, go to Thomas Coffee, the official coffee company of Coffee with Kenobi. We work with them, and they provide the most wonderful coffee. It smells great, it tastes great, and you will love it. You can also use the code DANZCWK20 for 20% off your order. Go to thomascoffee.com to check them out, and make sure again to use that discount code of DANZCWK20 at checkout to save 20% on your order. CWK Live is Tuesday nights at 7 o'clock p.m. Central Standard Time at coffeewithkenobi.com/live. This week, the top 5 is top 5 moments from this week's episode of Ahsoka, Far, Far Away. So get your list ready and join us on Tuesday night at 7 o'clock p.m. Central Standard Time at coffeewithkenobi.com/live. The Facebook group is the CWK Cafe at coffeewithkenobi.com/community for Star Wars thoughts, comments, reviews, and opinions in a family-friendly, spoiler, and drama-free place. Coffee with Kenobi is possible because of the members of the CWK Alliance. Thanks to you, the podcast, CWK Live, event coverage, and so much more comes to life. Find out how you can help join me and support the show for as little as $1 a month by joining the CWK Alliance, and you can receive access to CWK Prover, an exclusive weekly audio and video podcast not heard anywhere else. Plus, you can also find CWK Prover on Spotify. So you can go to Spotify, type in CWK Prover, and you can go there, support me, and hear exclusive podcasts not heard anywhere else. Plus, 10% of your monthly contributions go directly to St. Jude Children's Hospital. So you can go to Spotify and look up CWK Prover, or go to coffeewithkenobi.com/CWK Alliance to sign up and join the CWK Alliance. You can email me, danzy at coffeewithkenobi.com, connect with me on Twitter at MrZer, MRZEHR, or find me on Instagram at DanzerCWK, and also on LinkedIn. Coffee with Kenobi is on social media like Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, Pinterest, and TikTok, and you can also subscribe to Coffee with Kenobi's YouTube channel, where you can find over 700 videos, past live shows and events, and this podcast. Please take a couple of minutes to rate and review the show on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and Google Podcasts as well. And if you like the logo, go to coffeewithkenobi.com/shop for t-shirts, hoodies, stickers, and lots of other wonderful Coffee with Kenobi items. If you are starting a podcast or a blog, or already have one and want to expand your brand, then you can go to danzymedia.com, and I can help you get that process started. I am also available to come to your school, conference, business, or organization to talk about how to tap into your strengths and help you bring out your very best. Thank you as always for joining me each and every week for a virtual cup of coffee. I appreciate your time and look forward to the next opportunity where we can talk Star Wars together. I'm Dan Zaire, reminding you that this is the podcast you're looking for.
This podcast is not endorsed by the Walt Disney Company or Lucasfilm Limited. It is intended for entertainment and informational purposes only. The official Star Wars website can be found at www.starwars.com. Star Wars, all names, sounds, and any other Star Wars related items are registered trademarks and/or copyrights of Disney and their respective trademark and copyright holders. All original content of this podcast is the intellectual property of Coffee with Kenobi unless otherwise indicated.
This is the podcast you're looking for.